So for my information, Melanie has filled us in on your series and where you're at and what you've been discussing, but I just wanted to know a little bit of where you guys are from and what your interests are. Does anyone want to volunteer that information? I know we've got some Forest Service folks here, maybe some outfitter guide folks here. Okay, and do we have some BLM Park Service, University? I just want to kind of get a feel. I have a lot of slides. So if you're getting bored, tell me and I'll go faster, but a lot of them are pictures, so it won't be too boring, I promise. So my name is Liz Roberts and I am a biologist for the White River National Forest. At the time that we did this study, my role was very unique. I was a winter sports wildlife biologist, and no one really has those anywhere except for the White River. And the reason for that is the amount of developed and dispersed recreation that occurred on that forest, still occurring on that forest, and the demand with the listed species that we had, one of them being the Canada lynx. So how much of lynx history do you want? A little bit or a lot? I could talk all night. I'll give you a little bit. Lynx was listed in 2000. We were under a new forest plan in 2002, and we had some direction to manage and conserve areas for lynx. So a lot of those areas overlapped winter recreation areas. And when we were doing project analysis and trying to implement our travel management and our new direction, we didn't have the science to make the conclusions that we needed to make, both on the rec side and on the lynx biology side. So that's why we did this study. It started in 2010, and it went until 2014, and we are still working on our publications. Research takes a long time. I just want you to remember that through this presentation, but it's worth it. Okay. Collaboration. I know Melanie was just talking about that. It was huge for the success of this research. We worked with many partners, and without them, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did. And so this is a list of our partners, and there are many individuals that helped out too that I didn't put on this slide, but we recognize them. So the goal, again, we just did not have the science to support increased recreation, change in developed recreation, change in dispersed recreation. So we wanted to understand in space and time how lynx and winter recreation overlapped. And the reason we chose, well, we had to choose winter recreation is it's when lynx are in their prime home range. And so it's where their basic life characteristics and necessities have to be met in order for them to be successful. And so that's why we're studying them during the winter months. Our first objective, and these are funny to me. I mean, this is almost 10 years later, and these are very loaded, but we were able to tease through some of these. And first was develop ski areas. We wanted to know if they were using them, how they were using them, and how often. And so we wanted to know if they were going into the ski area during operations or whether or not they were staying in there or leaving because of operations. Our second was our dispersed recreation area. Along the White River National Forest, if you travel on I-70, you have Copper Mountain, Vail Winter Rec Area, Vail Ski Mountain. And then if you go south from there, you've got all sorts of other developed and very highly visited areas. So we wanted to understand lynx relationships with dispersed recreation. And we tiered it into different groups, and you're going to hear a lot about that. So go to 3. So this objective came a little bit later, year 2 in the study. As we were collecting lynx points, we realized we were collecting data on our highway system in Colorado. So we were able to develop maps showing probability of crossing areas across western Colorado, and so that's where this objective came in. So our study area, over the 4 winter seasons, we started up north in the Vail Pass Winter Rec area. At the time, it was 2010, at the time we knew we had about 3, 4, 5 resident lynx there, and that's a very small sample size. So we knew we had to have comparisons and go outside that area, so we moved down to the southwest our next year, and then kind of curved back around to Leadville area in our last year. So this is the range of our study area, and they were very different areas, but we learned a lot about recreation in both of those areas. So we were glad to have been both places. Quantifying winter recreation. So I'm a biologist, and they said, okay, if you do this, you have to also study the people out there too. And that was really hard for me because the biologists don't really like to talk to people. And then we had to go out and ask them to do something for us, and we could not give them anything in return. So we quantified winter recreation by trail counters, which were very helpful for portal points. Our first year, we tried doing high-resolution aerial photography. And so we had a plane go and take pictures of the Vail Pass Winter Rec area, and then we tried to stratify based on the tracks we were seeing. It was a lot of work, and it really wasn't giving us the answers we wanted, so we only did that our first year. And then the number 3 was the asking skiers and snowmobilers to carry a GPS unit. This is 2010, and this is before iPhones had all those apps on them that would, track themselves. And we were pretty cool because people said, oh my gosh, you're going to give us this, and then our incentive then was to mail them a track of where they went for the day. And so the track would have their elevation range, the speed they went, the terrain they went over, and we'd put it on a Google map, and they just thought it was awesome. We stratified our recreation user groups into snowmobile, hybrid snowmobile skiing, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, backcountry ski and snowboard, snowshoe, cross-country ski, and then heli skiing when we were down in the Southwest. We would approach a group of recreationists, and we'd ask one individual in that group to carry the unit. The unit is this small little sports GPS unit. They don't even make them anymore. But the unit would pick up a point every 5 seconds that the person was recreating. And again, we emailed them their track. It was pretty fun. So at the same time, I had to color Lynx, and we used GPS technology to color Lynx. With the GPS collar and the Lynx, it picked up a point every 20 minutes, 24 hours a day. So we actually went through our battery pretty fast, but we felt like it was really important to be tracking them 24 hours a day because we wanted to understand daytime use and nighttime use. So the way we caught Lynx is we built them a house in the woods where we thought they might be, and this is what we call a box trap. We would provide food in there for them, and they would have water from snow melt. We would kind of build a shelter. We checked them every 24 hours, so they weren't in there very long. But they would walk in, step on a board, and then the door would shut behind them. And we had our technicians out in the field every day checking all our trap lines. We would put up anywhere from, depending on how many locations we were working on, we had anywhere from 2 lines to 10 lines running. And so we were pretty busy. It was really fun. Our sample size for Lynx, it's really hard to trap a Lynx. And so we knew we wouldn't have a large sample size, but we had a diverse sample size. We had 20 collared animals to 18 individuals. We had some repeats 2 years in a row up in the Vail area. And we documented over 64,000 Lynx points over the 4 years. And our sample window, again, is winter months, January to March. And the first year was really tough because it was a low snow year, and we weren't able to trap till later in the season. So we didn't use a lot of that data in 10. So this is really just for winters of data. Okay, since I'm not going to talk a ton about Lynx, I want to just kind of give you a summary. Our focus, like I said in the beginning, we have highway crossing data, recreation user analysis. We're going to go into that. Recreation concentration areas. Our data was able to show us some concentration areas between user groups. We studied a little bit about Lynx behavior around different recreation types. And so over space and time, we were able to correlate the points and determine whether or not they were having some sort of response based on the level of recreation surrounding them at the time. And then we're working on a co-occurrence paper right now of winter recreation in Canada Lynx. So I'm only going to talk about the behavior response because I think it's the most interesting. And there was a lot of assumptions going into this study. There was a lot of, similar to what Melanie was talking about, just a lot of opinions and a lot of user groups saying one is worse than the other and they're having more impact than the other one, therefore we should have more. We didn't know anything. We didn't know what was happening. And so we wanted to be able to answer those questions a lot better. And we felt like this behavioral response would help us with that. Oh, this is an image of Lynx points. Those are all different points. Different colors represent a different animal. And then recreation tracks. And I have tons of these, so I'll go over what they mean in a minute. A direct looked at Lynx response to seasonal recreation intensity rather than habitat similarities. We were building resource functions that would show us recreation selections and Lynx selections, but we wanted to still look at that response. Trying not to get into too much statistics here. Compared Lynx movement speed to recreation intensity, compared Lynx use versus available points to recreation intensity and time aspects, temporal aspects, and then Lynx behavior around developed ski areas. We were really trying to answer that question. So this next image represents our two different study areas. And so our green tracks, and this is a theme throughout the whole presentation, is going to represent what we call our hybrid group. Our blue tracks represent our backcountry skiers group. Our yellow, oranges, I don't know what it shows up there, pretty orange, snowmobiling. And then purple is cross-country skiing, snowshoeing. So the polygons on here are different Lynx home ranges. So you can see that their home ranges are pretty large in comparison to where we did our snapshot in time of our recreation points. So this is where this recreation is occurring over a 3-month period, and these are these Lynx home ranges that we colored. So you can see that they're coexisting and overlapping and have room outside the recreation footprint. So what we determined through this analysis is Lynx slowed their movement rate in the presence of greater snowmobile and backcountry ski activity. So they just slowed down where they were moving. They didn't leave the area, they didn't turn around and go the other direction. They just slowed down and hunkered down while that activity was occurring. In these hybrid areas, and what way we define hybrid, most of you probably already know this. I had no idea what it was until we started studying it. But it's when a snowmobile pulls a skier or snowboarder further out to the backcountry, drops them off, and then they ski in different terrain. But we found that there was a lot of overlap with Lynx and hybrid skier use. And so they would move faster to either get out of the way. And this really, for me as a biologist, highlighted the importance of security areas for these animals and connectivity. And so while we have a recreated landscape, as long as we have areas that are secure that they can go to while this activity is going on, they can coexist. So it is important to plan for those connectivity areas. And this one I kept in, I was going to take out. But one point I want to make on this slide is that in the Vail area, Vail Pass Winter Rec area sees 35,000 users on average a winter. A lot of use in an area that's concentrated. And in this data analysis, it showed that they were kind of avoiding those snowmobile areas. But down in the San Juans, it's not as crowded, but we still have a lot of snowmobile use down there, and they weren't. And the one difference I wanted to point out, and this is all relative on the data you collect, how you collect it, and the locations you're collecting it. The Lynx down in the San Juans were Colorado-born Lynx, and they were born into that environment. The Lynx that we colored up in the Vail area were actually relocated Lynx who were not born in that environment, and so it was new to them. And so that helps kind of understand that difference, because I feel like I was saying two different things, but they are still moving in the same area that the snow machines are. And so here's an image of Ironton, Colorado, where it's a cross-country ski area. And we had a couple of Lynx that lived around this cross-country ski area, but I just wanted to show you the overlap. Those red dots are the Lynx points. And then you have the cross-country. It's a groomed trail in one area, but they ski around that. And we see a lot of this throughout the whole study, a lot of overlap. This next slide is backcountry skiers in the Ophir, Colorado area, and then the red lines in the back are the heli skiing. But we have some overlap there. Ophir, we were pretty successful in collaring every year down there. There's quite a few lynx that live down in that area. So I'm going to move on to rec now, but just, you know, there is a spatial tolerance and there is somewhat of a behavioral modification of lynx, but it's not necessarily a negative behavioral modification, but they do adapt to those areas. And rather than leaving high intense areas during the day, they simply become less active, and then after the area settles down, they start moving around in there. With the developed ski area, it was really challenging to do a good data synthesis with there because we just didn't have lynx using the ski area. So we had them collared surrounding the ski area, but they weren't going in and using the ski area. So we can't come to real concrete conclusions about that because we couldn't get them to go in there and show us what they were doing. So I don't really have anything else to say about that. But so now I'm going to go through a few of our recreation data summaries. And when we first started this, we were doing kind of more simple summaries with the recreation data. We were using the trail counters, looking at the portal use, using the GPS units and kind of quantifying use patterns, use intensities, and the number of people out there. So I'm going to go through some of those summaries we came up initially and then what we decided to do with the rec data. So again, here's our recreation footprint up in the Vail area. That green is pretty intense. There's a lot of that hybrid use in the center of the Vail Pass Winter Rec area. But you have every mode of recreation occurring up there. And this is really out of date. There's actually new modes of recreation happening now that we didn't quantify at the time. San Juan recreation footprint, much more spread out. Vail is very concentrated in its designated areas, whereas down in the southwest, it's spread out along the highway system there. Our trail counter data, I thought that there was some interesting information for you here, especially in comparing the two studies. Portals were really important. And portals are really worth quantifying because you can look at entry and exit points anywhere along the line of highway safety, user overlap, and we found that there were areas that were far more used than others, and it was hard to quantify this down in the southwest because you can kind of pull over wherever on the highway and go and recreate in the backcountry there. As you look at the Vail Pass area, there's really only 4 major points you can enter there. I didn't point out in the last one, the top user count, I think, was 4,000 in the San Juans, and in Vail Pass, we had anywhere from 10 to 12,000 users at a portal in one location. So just kind of gives you the difference in scale of user groups of those two study areas. We also worked really closely with the 10th Mountain Hut Division, and we collected some data on hut use, and that was super interesting and really fun. We got to go stay in the huts. So our recreation summary data, like I said, we stratified it into user type. And so we had our hybrid ski, snowboard, snowmobile, snowshoe, and then we added in the heli ski in the Telluride area. So each of those GPS units would collect a long track, but they were picking up a point every 5 seconds. And so at the end of the study, we had over 3 million recreation points, which is a lot of data in comparison to what we were getting for our animal data. And so us biologists decided that maybe we should do something with this data because this is an incredible data set. And there wasn't any other recreation study at the time that had a data set that large. And so we worked with our rec managers to kind of figure out what we could do with this. But some of our preliminary data, we could look at recreation by month. And 1, 2, 3 is January, February, March, our core months. And we could stratify by use. And that ski, snowboard, I think we changed the colors on this on you, sorry, is pretty popular everywhere. Definitely more popular with the hybrid combination. We had a lot of that. So we looked by month, And then we looked at the days of the week. And one of our requests on the White River was to increase guiding on weekends, and that was really hard with public use. And so we modified some of our outfitter guide permits to maybe increase during the week. Would be a better user guide experience given the numbers we were having on the weekend in some of our areas. We broke it down by hour, and none of this was surprising to us. We knew midday was the most popular time to recreate in the wintertime, especially in Colorado. We looked at distance traveled, and obviously we have our motorized that's going to travel a lot further. But again, this hybrid group was we learned a lot because we didn't even factor this into one of our user groups, and then all of a sudden they were showing us so much about how they used these recreation areas. I was talking about the 10th Mountain Hut. We developed quite a track system for them, which was pretty fun, and there are still people that do hut-to-hut trips. So most people just go into one and out the other, but we actually had some that were hopping around huts. Recreation tracks down again, we're in Mullis Pass area, and you can look at that user group overlap. And those were some of the rec managers down there were really trying to understand where those concentration areas were, where the overlap was, and this really illustrates a lot of that. This is my favorite track. So this is outside Silverton, and we would meet these backcountry skiers who are amazing. And they would go up in the morning, and then they would go up again. But they would go up and then ski down, and sometimes they do 2 tracks in a day. It was truly amazing. But you could kind of see how they were selecting terrain and where they were headed. And when you designate a whole recreation area, what we were seeing is we're really not using all of that area that's designated. There are limitations and there are preferences. And so we were able to really highlight some of that. Turquoise Lake near Leadville. Last year we moved up to the Leadville area. We had some Lynx that resided in the Collegiate Peak area, and it was pretty popular with every mode of transportation. We were able to collar a couple of Lynx up there, and the recreationists were great and cooperated. We had really great compliance. When we first started the study, people said, nobody's ever going to comply. No one's going to carry a unit for you. People were really excited. We were so appreciative because we couldn't have done it without their cooperation. We looked at recreation around the Loveland Pass area. We were not able to trap any animals in that area, so we didn't really do much with this, with the comparison with Lynx, but we still kept the rec data as part of our data set. And this is skiing again. And this is a little misleading. We cleaned the data and took out the road system. Kind of hybrid, but by car, because the car takes them, and then, you guys know how that works. And then the rec tracks in Ophir, and those guys in Ophir, same thing, go up 2 or 3 times a day and ski. Motorized near the Lizard Head Pass, we spent a lot of time up there. We collared a couple of animals near that area as well. There's a big snowmobile run. Probably some of you have done it, but Ophir over to Silverton. And so we had some tracks in there. And then here's an image of heli skiing. So get dropped off on top, ski down. And then this last one is the Val Pass Winter Rec area, a little bit closer up. And it just kind of shows you've got every user group up there, and they really end up, some of this is designation up there, but there's a lot of separation of use up there. Okay, so we had 3 million data points, and we said we have to do something with this. And so as a wildlife biologist, we like to look at habitat suitability. And so we like to build resource selection functions, models to look at suitability. So predict, based on what an animal is selecting to live in, we're going to predict how much of that habitat might be available for them to live in the area. So objectives, we have a new objective now. We want to do this recreation analysis. We've worked with our recreation folks, and we feel like this data can help us a lot. So we want to characterize how each recreation activity type uses winter recreation landscape. characterized to the extent to which recreation types overlap with one another. That's a big one. We want to know what the overlap is, and then to improve winter dispersed recreation planning, and then any travel management planning. We want to, how we can plan in the future. And again, when I started this study, I was more in the reactive mode. You guys have the opportunity to be very proactive here, which is really amazing, and it's a great opportunity. But I was reacting to things I couldn't answer, and so I was trying to move as fast as I could, and research isn't fast. So we decided to build this resource selection function for people instead of animals, and it turned out to be very informative. So I won't go into too much detail, but a resource selection function is any model that yields values proportional to the probability of use of a resource unit. Oh, that's way too much. So basically, that means that we can take any kind of data point of use, and in this case, we had all these human use data points, and we can figure out different variables that correlate with one another to help us build a footprint of where, if they're going and recreating in this kind of environment, here's another environment very similar to that, which means they could probably recreate there as well. And so we're going to build all these predictive maps to show the potential of different types of recreation across Western Colorado. And so that's what this resource selection modeling did for us under recreation. And so we selected preferences for snowmobilers, hybrid skiers, backcountry skiers. We then had to split some of that into little fine tune, and I'll talk about that. But we're gonna provide Kay and her team these maps of this predictive surface of here's where they can, based on what they're doing, here's where else they can go. So if we're gonna do future rec planning, here's potential areas. Now this did not incorporate any current management actions, any other listed species. We just kind of did this blanket prediction model. We didn't factor in any limitations when we did this. We chose 12 environmental covariates across Western Colorado. This is another wordy slide. But here's a list of the variables that we used. And a lot, we had topography, we had distance from highway. That's a big one, especially for a non-motorized person. There's only so far you can get in a day, although people can get really far. Road density, forested area versus a non-forested area, an edge area. So we looked at all of these variables and the correlation of them. I'm trying not to get too sciencey. There's 3 million data points. There was a lot of data cleaning to get to the point where we could use these variables and correlate them. And so we cleaned the data. We took out a lot of the huts, the roads, the parking lots. Sometimes people would stand there, but your data is picking up points up there every 5 seconds. Any outliers we took out. And then we had to split the data. So for the hybrid, we had to do a probability surface for the motorized side of the hybrid, and then we had to do one for the non-motorized because we couldn't mix them together because those two actions were selecting different variables. And so for the snowmobile, we did an on-trail snowmobile predictive map, and then we did a snowmobile play area, the open areas where they go off-trail and ride around there. And then we had the backcountry ski. I'm almost done. Okay, so here's our maps. Here is an example of snowmobile on-road. And so the colors indicate red being a higher probability that they would select that terrain based on the similar areas that they were selecting, and then hot is higher, and then as it gets cooler, it's less probability. So snowmobile on road. This is for all of Western Colorado. Snowmobile off road, and so which actually makes a lot of sense to me. Does this thing have a pointer? Oh, I screwed something up. Okay. This. Okay. So, which we can already kind of see that. And so here we've got Rabbit Ears Pass, and we have a large winter motorized area. We've got the Vail Pass winter rec area here. we have the potential in the flat tops here, and then the mesa right here. So, and then your area, I don't know it very well, I'm sorry, but you know, there's quite a bit that shows up in this area that has the potential to be a similar recreation terrain and experience than what these folks were doing throughout the study. And then we have our hybrid. We have the snowmobile side, so the snowmobile takes you out to a certain point, drops the skier or snowboarder off, and then they ski in that terrain. And so that, again, the red being the higher probability of an area that they would do that same type of recreation. And then the last one is our backcountry ski. And so we were really excited about building this resource selection function for human use because we hadn't done it before. And I think that we could continue to collect data and update this anytime we needed to. Now that the model is built, we can funnel this data in. We could funnel a new type of recreation, the snow bikes. Yeah, snow bikes, fat tire bikes, all those different types of recreation that has grown since we did this study. And the data would be a lot easier to get than it was from handing out a GPS unit because everybody has an app on their phone, and so they're tracking themselves. So having a data drop database or somewhere where you can place that data, you don't have to tell us who you are or anything. Everything was anonymous for our samples, and you could continue to build this database of this snapshot in time of how people are recreating in the landscape. And some people came up to us and they said, we don't want to give you our information because we're going to get in trouble because we're going where we're not going to. We're like, we don't care. We're just doing research. We want you guys to tell us where you're going so we can then manage things better. So these are the maps we produced to look at the probability of recreation across Western Colorado based on the recreation data that we had collected. So, okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So Kay Hopkins is one of our recreation wilderness managers for the White River National Forest. And so I've worked quite a bit with her throughout the study, and then what do we do with this recreation data set, and also with Rich Stoke. And they're pretty excited because I think that while we were reactive in collecting this, I think it can teach us a lot about future recreation planning in the dispersed setting. So I'm going to let you take it from here.